What up, good people? It's Will. I had someone ask me what I did to my trigger on my competition gun, so I figured I'd go over that. Let me just say that my competition gun now is at about 3 pounds, maybe a little less. I don't do that for self-defense. Self-defense, my triggers go down to 4 pounds and I leave them there. I don't go any lower than that. But I'll show you what I did. First, let's do some trigger pull test. The gun is clear. I'm not going to show you. Just going to take my word for it or not. So we'll pull, see what we have. So that's right at 3. Not sure if you can see that. Close enough. That's right at 3. Just a little bit below 3. And we'll do one more. I'm not pulling right at the tip of the trigger, because if you pull right at the edge, then you'll definitely get a lower pull. I'm pulling kind of into at the bottom of the safety tab. So we're right at 3 on this one as well. And that'll go down a little bit as I shoot the gun more and more. I have some newer parts in there. Oh shit. They'll start to wear, and then that trigger pull weight will go down. So I'm just gonna break the gun down and show you kind of what I did to get down to 3 pounds. Stock weight is about between 5.5 and 6. I'm struggling. Trying to do this and look through the camera. It's not working. Plus having these gloves on. All right, yeah, I have the gloves on. Well, my gun is dirty, but also I'm trying to reduce the amount of exposure I get to lead. So if you shoot a lot, handle guns a lot, handle ammo a lot, you can expose yourself to lead and get high lead levels. So that's bad. You can Google that if you're not sure about the side effects. All right, so a couple things that I did. Gun is dirty, so you have to bear with me. See this right here, this silver piece. All right, so here is your safety plunger. This has to get depressed down by the tab on the trigger right here in order for the gun to go off. So this gets pushed back against that. So I reduced the spring that's under there to reduce the weight of the pull. Second thing is your striker, which is, you see the end of it in the silver tab here. So I reduced the spring on the striker. The stock one is 5.5, and I went down to 4. So as the trigger has to pull this back in order for the gun to fire, there's less resistance, which reduces the pull of the trigger. So those two springs reduced it. The striker spring reduced it more than the plunger spring. The plunger spring is just a minor adjustment. The other thing I did was I changed the connector. I went with a black Yikes connector from the Glock store. With the lighter connector, it goes more of or it has more of a rolling break than it does like a really crisp trigger, which is fine for me. So if you're not familiar with the rolling break, like a harder break is going to have like a definitive wall and then a crisp break where it's like snap. This has more of a rolling break where the wall isn't too noticeable and you can just pull right through it. Kind of like what you would do with a revolver or like a double action trigger. So it feels more like that, to be honest with you, than it does having that definitive wall. But that's fine because when I'm shooting fast, especially with that first shot, I can just pull right through that wall and there's less of a chance of me pulling the gun off target. So that is really the advantage of having a lighter trigger. There's less force you need to input into the trigger to break the shot. There's less chance of you disturbing your sight picture one way or the other as the shot is fired and the round goes down range. So the connector really is probably one of the cheapest ways, along with the springs, to reduce your trigger pull. It's not really an expensive thing. Springs usually cost about $10, and a connector might be $25. Could be a little less depending on which one that you're going with. Just a little bit of warning, I went with the 4-pound striker spring. Because of that, the striker doesn't come forward with as much force because the spring is weaker. So that's your trade-off. And if I have ammo that has harder primers, then my gun isn't reliable. So factory is reliable because it's 5.5 pounds. It's going to break any primer known to man. But at 4 pounds, it really likes Federal because they're soft, but it doesn't like Winchester too much. Winchester's hit or miss. So for my reloads, I run Federal only. I pay an extra $5 for the Federal because it'll break that reliably and not the Winchester. The last thing that I did was I polished it. So I'm gonna stop the video now. I'm gonna break the gun down. You don't need to see me do that. And then I'll show you where I polish, because there's one spot, especially on the Gen 5, that you might not think to polish, and it's an important spot. So I'll be back. All right, so I have the gun broken down, and I'm going to show you all the places that I polish. Just remember, when you polish, you're doing just that. You're smoothing it out. You're not trying to remove a lot of material or change the geometry of whatever part that you're polishing. So that's really important, especially when you're using a Dremel. If you're doing it by hand with a Q-tip or a cloth, it would take a lot to do that. But when you're using a Dremel, you have to be really careful, because you don't want to change geometry. All right, so known places that you polish: outside the trigger bar, inside of the trigger bar there, and along this edge where it also interfaces with the connector. Make sure the back side of your cruciform where it interfaces with the striker. And I also, under this tab on the cruciform here, because that's where it sits on the ledge where it falls off, so I polish under there as well. But one of the areas, a couple areas people might not realize, is the inside of your frame. The bar, the trigger bar, is actually rubbing against part of that. And you can see where I polished on the inside of the slide stop here, or slide release, whatever you want to call it. Right here is because that is where the trigger bar also rubs against. So you have that metal on metal. So you can see where it's darker. That's not actually dirt. That's because I only polished this part because that's where it rubs. I didn't want to waste my time doing the rest of it. I don't care what it looks like. So inside here is another area that people might not catch. So those will just smooth the gun out a little bit. Depending on how rough it was, it could potentially lower your trigger pull a little bit. It's not going to be a huge difference, but the gun will be a lot smoother. And then what I'll do is I'll put it back together, and I'm going to show you how, as all those parts are rubbing against each other on this side of the frame, it actually pushes the frame out a little bit. So we'll see if the camera will pick that up. So I'll be right back again. All right, so I have the gun back together. I'm just going to pull the trigger a little bit, and we'll see if you can see a bulge on this tab right here, which is the slide stop. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. The camera will pick it up. Yeah, it's moving a little bit, but I don't know if you can see that. Let's get a little closer. I need to break the shot. See how that's moving up a little bit? That's because that trigger bar is rubbing on there. So you want to make sure all those places where you have metal on metal or metal on plastic, anything that's rubbing, that's where you want to polish. If your gun has been shot a good amount, you already have wear areas, and you can look at those wear areas and see where you're going to need to be polished, or what is going to need to be polished. But either way, if you have any questions, let me know.